Hey guys, welcome back. It is CGC article time. We're going to talk about these bad boys here. We got the test print, or what we're going to call a test print. No one knows the actual origin. From what I've seen, they're going to call this one the Disco Hollow. But yeah, it's a lot of speculation. It's a lot of, should you really verify these cards? Should you really authenticate these cards? I think it's useful to give the information that CGC is in the article here, but I still think it's questionable whether it should be something that's graded or authenticated or not. Certainly the condition grade, when even CGC themselves is noting the fact that it was probably hand cut. So at that point, if you had a hand cut card that was just a regular card, are you okay with that? No, they wouldn't grade it. Most companies wouldn't grade it. They shouldn't grade it. If you trim a card, they shouldn't grade it. Yes, I know some of them get through the cracks. We've seen multiple examples of altered cards with PSA, with BGS, especially with a lot of the sports stuff. I'm sure more. There's a lot less Pokemon cards that are altered, but yeah, it happens. More so on the coloring end, less so on the trimming end, because most Pokemon cards, they have rounded edges. They have a certain, pretty consistent dimensions around the card, around the borders and everything else. So before we get into this, I'm going to share my experience with this. I know Rusty, TCA Gaming, has a video on this. He had a sheet, and even then, a lot of speculation there. I met somebody, or I have a friend that owns a Ninetales of this type, and from their story or their recollection, they initially thought it was a fake card, but it turns out that their friend's parent was taking sheets of these home, cutting them up and giving them to the kids, cutting them at home. So this is where it gets a little bit dangerous. This is another one of those instances. It's like the proto-stoys, the people that own these, the people that took them home from work, even if it was permitted back in those days. Like we hear endless stories of the WotC scrap table. It's no longer the case. I'm sure there is some stuff that's taken home, whether it's against the rules or not. Different story. Whether the intention is, to like sell them years later for thousands of dollars. Definitely, probably not, was not the case. This was more like a bring what you want home because there's no real value. I mean, there's some value there because you're bringing them home, cutting them up for kids, but also just a bunch of stuff that you're probably sitting on as well. Should we be taking everything here for like gospel in terms of like proto-stoys, where Shell, who worked for Wizards of the Coast as a typesetter, he was selling a copy of it, at least one copy of it, through someone else, through eBay, to remove his name, essentially. I would assume that's the motivation for selling it through someone else. But he was also the source for some of the information on the origin of the card. So if they call it like a prototype and he's making some stuff up that maybe he remembers some details, maybe he doesn't. It didn't seem like he was very clear on it. It doesn't seem like anyone's very clear on this, but I can tell you more of these exist. They're probably out there somewhere. Who knows how many? Who knows? Somebody could be sitting on a ton of sheets of these. Someone could have them cut up already. Someone might just have the sheets themselves. This is stuff that there's no actual release. There's no numbers. We don't really know how many are out there. So somebody, extremely high risk to buy something like this because we just don't know. There could be a shell out there that just has a stack of these bad boys. You could have binders filled with them because it was scrap or whatever that they brought home, chopped up. If they were given to the kids, they probably had some pretty ridiculous quantities of it. So keep that in mind. This is dangerous. I think it's dangerous in terms of like authenticating and grading and designating this as a test print. You can say that it was likely, almost certainly printed at some point for some reason, but when you start putting test print right on the label, people aren't going to read beyond the label. Also with the 5.5 and no mention, you put test print on there, which is not confirmed. But something like the fact that it's, cut by hand, very likely, almost certainly, and that's not on the label. Why is that not on the label? I don't know. There's only so much room on the label. You got a lot of space on the back there, but at the same time, I don't like this stuff. If you can't tell, I like the history, and when this stuff is discovered, that they're verifying that the materials used, but I don't like when you're giving a story to something that doesn't have a verifiable story. It's not verifiable. No one knows the story, even within here. All right, let's read the article before I get too worked up here. CGC Trading Cards certifies extremely rare base set Charizard test print. By Paul Sandler. Again, if you want to go for credibility, this is someone that was sent DMs and sent a stolen card that they knew was stolen. Paul knew it was stolen. It shows in the DMs that he knew it was stolen, and he was excited to grade the card because it was pressed for CGC. Encourages bad actors. Yes, I get that stuff was leaked out of the factory. I get that this was probably leaked out of the factory and to some extent, whether it was permitted or not, whether someone signed off on it or not, whether Pokemon signed off on it or not, different story. But again, it's more the initial theft that is the issue with the modern stuff, especially before the sets come out, because that's when Pokemon doesn't want things to be revealed. People want to think that they want everything revealed, but they don't. We saw it. Sword and Shield guidebooks. Again, guys, Sword and Shield guidebooks, people spoiled the contents of the guidebooks and they got sued for $150,000 a piece. That's the issue I have with it. It's not the fact that somebody later on has something that was stolen from the factory at some point. I mean, the Gold Star dogs is kind of a different story too, because that pretty much ruined the set. It ruined the dogs. It ruined a lot of things. But yeah, Paul. Should we trust Paul? Probably not. Is he just doing what's in his best interest, what's in CGC's best interest to get hype dogs sucking each other off? Probably. CGC Trading Cards was thrilled to recently authenticate and grade an extremely rare Charizard test print card from the 1999 base set. So here we're talking in absolutes about how it is a test print card, but we can be pretty certain that it's a test print card, but we don't know of what kind. We don't know the origin. How do you authenticate something that doesn't have all the information at hand? It's not like something that you could buy and pull out of a pack. We have something here that is very obscure with an unknown origin. The card is exceptionally interesting because it lacks many details, like an image of Charmeleon in the evolution box, the flavor text below the art box, and the energy symbols that would typically be seen on the card. In addition, the card features a unique disco holofoil pattern that has never been used on any regular production Pokemon cards. The term disco is CGC trading cards, as there is no official description of the foil type. No, there's no official release. There's no official description because it wasn't an official card. Got it? This is again, so this article not as useful necessarily as the previous with the Protostoys stuff, because we already know that this is real. It was on a real sheet. Like, people don't print fake sheets of Pokemon cards. This is a lot of the same equipment that they're just kind of reusing from the other stuff, which is great. It's good to check, but again, I think it's overkill, and using verification to justify a story rather than justifying the fact that it's a real card. We get it's a real card, it's real materials. It's not a real story. There's no real story. The card is square cut and likely was cut from an original sheet, such as the one seen here. Test prints were generally not cut at the factory, and when they were, the cards often did not make it to the corner rounding process. As these are very esoteric items, CGC trading cards does not differentiate test prints as being either factory cut or not factory cut. So, I mean, I think it's pretty clear that this is not factory cut, just based on how not straight these are. Whether they use like a guillotine of some kind, maybe, who knows? But it'd be interesting to see if the dimensions actually lined up to be the actual dimensions of a Pokemon card. I guess that would kind of be a determining factor. My guess is that they would be off slightly. Weird that they didn't include that in the article. That would be a sure tell way to know whether or not it's factory cut or not. You're going to go put it through all these UV, IR tests and everything else, but you can't measure the card itself. Maybe next time. Close-up of the art box showing the unique disco hollow pattern. History of the card. Much of the information regarding these types of test prints is conjecture, but yeah, exactly. So how do you authenticate conjecture? But some assumptions can be made. No, not with authentication. For example, the sheet linked above, which was sold by, is this Hakes or Hawkeyes auctions in November 2021, features a hand-inscribed note of D. Davis 1-21, which almost certainly corresponds to the sign-off of a pressman on that sheet on January 21st, 1999. This was after the release of base set on January 9th of that same year. Therefore, this card was almost certainly not printed before the release of base set. I mean, it definitely wouldn't have been because it's got a shadow. So what did we reach out to D. Davis? Did we find D. Davis and ask him what was going on with this sheet? Might have been a good idea. Might have been good for the article. In addition, the sheet from the auction features the later layout of the unlimited print run sheets as opposed to those of the first edition print run. This adds to the evidence that it was not a test print that preceded the base set, but was instead one that followed. So is it a test print, or is it just foil test? Maybe. Who knows? We don't know. But it's authentic, apparently. It's impossible to know with certainty the purpose of these sheets, but perhaps WotC was testing a new hollow foil pattern for use on the unlimited run cards, or even for the fossil or jungle sets. In fact, former WotC lead typesetter Chris Nitz recalls multiple foils being tested. There were tests run on a variety of available foil stocks. This is likely one of them. So again, your best source of information doesn't know where or exactly why it happened. It doesn't recognize your disco designation foil. Who knows? Is it something that came from Wizards of the Coast? Almost certainly. Another possibility is related to the fact that some of the design elements are missing. This is akin to a paper money progressive proof, which could mean that the designers were tweaking some of the background elements for future print runs, or just that they didn't need to include those if they were just testing to see how the foil looked, or how the foil worked, or how the foil got printed on. Who knows? This was a common occurrence according to Mr. Nitz. I hate the fact that there are missing design elements. For example, the evolution graphics in the top left corner and the text on the bar under the Pokemon art, but this is how tests were done. While the reason these cards were printed may never be known, with CGC trading cards expertise, the card's authenticity is not a mystery. Well, I don't know. Personally, I think part of the authenticity is the actual history and release of it, of which there is still a ton of missing information. Authentic, I think that's a stretch. If you want to call it potential test print, Wizards of the Coast, maybe. We got the analysis of the card here. While many fakes and proxies exist of base set Charizards, even with a cursory glance, this card just looks right. Is that designation? The back appears completely correct, as does the printing quality on both sides. How about the measurements? The hollow pattern is similar to many counterfeits of the era, which might make someone believe this is also one. However, a closer look with CGC trading cards advanced technology proves this card was printed in the same way as a regular base set shadowless card. The test print left and regular shadowless Charizard right under infrared light. Click images to enlarge. In the two photos above, note the same way in which all of the inks react with the infrared light. Most notable is the text for Pokemon Power Energy Burn, as well as the rectangular box where the flavor text is on the regular card. Even all of the different color inks on the Charizard itself react in the same way to this light source. Well, yeah, but if it's all going to match up. I mean, typically you can tell if it was printed with some different equipment or different ink, you'd be able to tell even without light sources. But under the UV light here, again, under UV light, the two cards react in the same way. In both cases, the only UV reactive areas are the white parts of the design in the flames and surrounding Charizard. This is another very positive sign, as counterfeit cards typically utilize cardstocks or inks that react in a different manner than those of a genuine card. The backs of the two cards also look incredibly similar under infrared light. Clearly, it is a genuine Pokemon back. The back of the test print left and regular Shadows Charizard right under infrared light. It's weird that they didn't include the core analysis. I'd like to see that if it matches up. After establishing, are the foil ones, if the foil, like the side profile matches with a standard foil copy from an actual released copy. After establishing that a test print card has the appearance of a genuine card under multiple light sources, CGC Trading Cards goes above and beyond to prove the authenticity of a card beyond a reasonable doubt. Using an X-ray fluorescence, you're not proving the authenticity of the card, you're proving the authenticity of the materials used, I think is the biggest gripe I have with this wording. Using an X-ray fluorescence spectrometer, multiple spots on each card were tested. Graph of the chemical elements in the ink/cardstock of the test print green and regular card red. The above graph shows a scan of Charizard's wing on each card. All of the chemical elements, most notably calcium, titanium, iron, copper, and zinc, are there in very similar proportions. This proves that both the cardstock and ink used in the production of a regular card are the same used in the production of the test print. A graph of the chemical elements. We got the green, red, pink. This is the of a counterfeit card. I mean, these could be very drastically depending on where the counterfeit card was made, whether it's a homebrew or it's printed by some knockoff Chinese Pokemon cards of that era. The graph above shows an example of the types of differences between this test print, a genuine regular card, and a fake card. The zinc levels in the fake. See what? Yeah, but this is just which fake are we talking about here? Are we talking about all fakes, or zinky? Are many times those of the test print and a real card, and the test print and regular card have some zirconium, which is completely absent in the fake card. So this would be more meaningful if we know that where it was printed, that the press that they used at the time, or the inks that they used at the time were rich in zirconium. Maybe that's useful information, but just comparing it to some one random fake card is pretty meaningless. We're going to show some graphs here so people will think that it's more meaningful than what it is, but it's not really. The biggest thing of the article here is basically just showing that the materials used were the same materials used for a base set Charizard. Well, in the first graph of the calcium levels were a bit higher for the test print. Overall, the graphs tracked very closely together. This proves the card was printed by the same printer using the same cardstock and inks. I don't think it was necessarily printed by the same printer, unless they mean the company that printed it and not the actual physical printer itself. There are different brands and models and types and of printers that will give you the same results. It's more the plates and the ink that matter than the actual printing press itself. So I think they probably mean the company that printed it. Although I think it was later on than this that they used multiple companies to do so. And even then, if they were test prints, it could have been another company that did it, but they probably just used the same materials. Or it could have came along with another order or something like that. in between orders. A conclusively genuine test print. After a thorough review of the test print card, including a comparison with a known genuine example of the same card, it can be conclusively determined that the test print card is indeed genuine. Its authenticity was determined not only by CGC trading cards experts, but also by utilizing respected consultants, specialized imaging techniques, and XRF analysis. Who's the respected consultants? Are you talking about the source that you talked about out there that said he probably thinks it was probably a test print for testing foils? Due to their rarity and value within the hobby, cards like this Charizard require many hours of research to authenticate and grade. CGC Trading Cards is glad to pull back the curtain and share the processes used to certify these interesting cards from the earliest days of the Pokemon TCG. So, I think I accidentally said that it had a shadow. It doesn't have a shadow, but yeah, I think authenticity here is being used a little bit too loosely, and to just like designate it test print, it's a little sketchy. Also, maybe give it a measure, if you can, guys, at CGC. It should be pretty easy to see if it actually matches a shadowless Charizard in terms of height and width, and then you'll know whether or not it was hand cut or not, and then you can designate that on the label. I know that that's not going to add value to the Charizard, but yeah, it's essentially altered at that point. But if you want to, include it and grade it anyway, then maybe that's the means to do so. I don't know where the line is, but it's weird. It's a weird kind of concept. I do like that there's actual kind of research going into it, but I think the research is a lot less conclusive than it needs to be before you can slap the big bold authentic on it. But that's just me. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Have a good day. Join the Discord. See you next time.